Hey, what's up everyone? I wanted to start off a brand new series on this channel, which is going to be a pretty in-depth discussion on Python. I'm going to be walking you guys through this step by step. This first episode here may be a little bit long. It's going to be a basic setup and installation guide for everything that you're going to need, as well as a little test to make sure that everything's working right. In the next and following episodes, I'm going to be showing you guys concepts encapsulated in each video. So each video will be pretty short, but they will go over one specific concept. And so hopefully that will be a pretty good format for you guys. I definitely want to have all of your feedback, so make sure that you leave comments down below and subscribe, of course, for more content. I do give this away for free, and this is some pretty valuable content, so make sure that you subscribe and support the channel in that regard. With that being said, let's get straight into this. All right, so here we are on our first web page. This is going to be the download page for Anaconda. This is a free download. As with a lot of things Python, Python is an open source language. It's free, so this is going to be a really great resource for you guys. It's going to include a lot of things, including Jupyter, which is what we're really going to be focused on, but it'll also include a lot of other libraries built straight into this. So this will work on all of the platforms, Linux, Mac OS, and Windows. So we're just going to click here on download. You will just save it to your downloads folder or wherever it is that you would like to save it to. We'll just save it here. It'll go through the downloading process. So this is about 630 megabytes. So it's not a huge file, but it is going to take a little bit depending on the speed of your internet. All right, so then you open it up, just click allow to whatever it says, go continue, read through all of the important information, give it access to whatever it wants, license, accept, and agree to that. Then it will prompt you to install it in a location. You just want to click install. I'm not going to do this right now since I already have this on my computer and I don't want to install it again, but you'd basically just go through the process as with any other installer. So once you have that installed, if you are on Mac, another thing that I would highly recommend you guys to do is download a program called iTerm2. This is a optional thing, but it is something that I find to be useful. It's similar to the standard terminal that comes with your Mac. However, it does include a couple of benefits over that, one of which is the ability to tile windows. So with your standard Mac terminal, you basically have one window. If you want to open up another terminal, you'll have to open up another window instance of that. In iTerm2, what's nice is that you can basically just use a keyboard command and split that window into how many ever vertical by horizontal blocks you want. So it's really, really handy in that regard. It's also a little bit more expandable and customizable than the standard terminal. So if that interests you guys, you can go over here to this link, download it, install it, and that will be that. Another useful tool that I want to recommend to you guys is Visual Studio Code. So VS Code has a lot of compatibility. It works with numerous different coding languages from Python to C++, C#. Any of those languages, this will be great for. JSON. It has a really nice, simple interface. You can customize it however you like, and it has really convenient tab completion and snippets and other things like that, that if you want to get into it, it's very expansive, and it provides a really nice place for you to develop and refine your code. So again, I'll leave links to this down in the description if you'd like to get started with this. The other resource that I wanted to introduce you guys to right off the bat is stackoverflow.com. So this is going to be a really great resource for you when you're just getting started with Python, since there's going to be quite a steep learning curve. And this is a really excellent free resource for you guys to be able to ask questions and find the answers to questions very quickly. Generally, if you type into Google or really any search engine, a Python-related question, this will be one of the first results to pop up. You'll find somebody who answered the question, somebody who asked a question, and it's just a really great way to build your prowess in terms of your Python ability. So those are the main things that you want to do to get started. Now, once we have Anaconda downloaded, there's a couple of ways that you can access this. So number one is you can go to your Anaconda navigator, which will be installed onto your computer. And this will basically just load up a GUI or graphical user interface for you to work out of. I think that this is probably going to be the easiest for most people, depending on how you got into computers. If you've only ever used GUIs or graphical user interfaces, this will be the most familiar way to get started. However, if you are a little bit more advanced, I will also show you how to get into this using a terminal. All right, so here we are on my terminal window. This is iTerm2 again, and basically, you can do everything that you can do inside of the Anaconda navigator inside of terminal, but it's basically just the terminal is sort of a direct line where the Anaconda navigator gives you buttons and clickable things so that way you don't have to actually know any of the code. But what we're going to do is get started by opening up a instance of Jupyter Lab. So Jupyter Lab is similar to a Jupyter Notebook, which is sort of the old version. Jupyter Lab is now what they generally use, and it's just a little bit of a cleaner interface. It's more modern, and this will just provide a really great test bed for us to get started learning how to code and how to program with Python. You just want to type cd, which is change directory. Then you want to push the little tilde key. That is basically a shortcut to tell Mac that you want to go to your home directory. Push a slash, and then we'll just do this right on our desktop. So DESKTOP. Alternatively, you could push the tab key and that'll autocomplete with the slash. And now we'll just push enter. Now we are on our desktop, and what we can do here is just say Jupyter Lab. If you don't see Jupyter become green, or if you run this and it doesn't do anything, so you may want to run pip install Jupyter Lab and then also do -- upgrade. And that will basically install it from ground zero, and if it's already installed on your computer, it'll update any components that need to be updated. So once you are done doing that, it may take a little bit of time. Your Jupyter Lab will be ready to use, and then you can just go ahead and start it by running the command Jupyter space lab. All right, and so now we will just run Jupyter Lab, and this will start up a local server. So again, if you are installing or you're upgrading Jupyter, it may also recommend that you do a build. So we'll just do this here, click build, and now we can go in here. And so what I would recommend you guys to do is go ahead and create a notebook. So this is going to be a Python 3 notebook. It will start out as being untitled. You can go here to File and then rename notebook. We'll just call this YouTube. Now our build is complete, so we can just save and reload. This will just restart our notebook, so that way we are all up to date. All right, so I wanted to interrupt this video to introduce today's sponsor, which is Underdog Games and their brand new board game, which is called Trekking the National Parks. This game is very awesome and has won a number of awards, including the Mensa Select Award, which is pretty outstanding. This game focuses on traveling and the exploration of the outdoors, particularly focused on America's national parks. This game focuses on traveling the United States and visiting national parks. In the game, you collect points by getting national park cards, collecting stones, and at the end of the game, whoever ends up with the most stones or second most stones gets additional bonuses. This game was created by a couple who wanted to share their love of national parks with the world through the creative process of building a board game, and they have done just that. This game is available on Amazon.com. You can find it using the link in the description below to pick it up. It frequently goes on sale and is a really enjoyable experience for anybody who loves board games and spending time together as a family or friends. So now back to the video. Inside of Jupyter, you'll see a couple of options. So you have up here in this taskbar, you have your standard like file, view, edit, run, kernel, tab, settings, help. On the left-hand side, this is sort of our navigation panel, so you can click on the little folder. This will show you all of the directories and files inside of your current directory that you're operating out of. Down here, we have all of our open tabs and our kernels that are open. And then you have plugins down here, so you can add in plugins if you wish, or just sort of stick with the default ones. And then up along the top bar here, we have the save icon, we have the add cell below button, we have a cut button, a copy, paste, run, interrupt, restart kernel and run all cells. And then you have a little selector here where we can choose what the current cell that's highlighted functions as. All right, so what we are going to first do is set up this notebook. So something that I would recommend doing is with any time that you are going through and trying to solve a problem, or you are setting up a notebook for the first time, it's always really good to have a Markdown cell. So Markdown is basically a coding language that is sort of similar to HTML. It provides you with the tools necessary to format nice pictures, to format your text in a nice and readable way. It also can use LaTeX, so if you know LaTeX, you can also do some formatting in that coding language, so that way you can get really nice formulas and other things like that. So what we'll do right here is type the pound symbol, and that will function as a title. So what we're going to do is YouTube Python tutorial. All right, and so now what I like to do is just put in little braces HR. This is a horizontal rule, or basically just a horizontal line. Makes a nice separation. We can then do BR, which is break, so that'll be like a space or an enter. All right, so what we're going to do here is go over how to import packages, go over basic syntax, go over loops, and we'll also show some examples of some of the things that you can do in terms of basic Python. All right, so tackling our first goal here, how do we import packages? So this whole concept may sound a little bit foreign if you've never done anything like programming before or never worked with any coding languages. But basically, Python has in itself a couple of functions and basic tools at your disposal. Now, those functions and basic tools can be used to accomplish certain tasks. However, there are already people who have accomplished tasks that you may need as a part of your ultimate goal. And so rather than having to rewrite everything, you may just want to find a library that already does some of the things that you want it to do, so you can focus on tackling your difficult problem that nobody's ever tackled before. So a good example of this is, say, navigating around your operating system, right? So what we did in the terminal before using CD and other things like that, that can be done in Python too. However, you don't want to have to memorize your operating system's functions and other things like that. You want it to sort of all be recognized and automated, so that way you can just function on moving from directory to directory, creating files, creating directories, things like that. What we're going to do here is import a utility called OS. So import OS. All right, and we're also going to import another package which is called NumPy. So NumPy is short for numerical Python. This is going to be very useful if you are into calculus, physical chemistry, any type of discipline that uses math. Even if you are looking at learning Python for finances and projections and things like that, NumPy will be very useful to you. We will import that, so you can do import NumPy. Now, you could leave it like this, but writing NumPy before any of the variables and functions that exist in NumPy is a little bit taxing. So a common thing that we as programmers like to do is import packages as something. So you can say import NumPy as, and then the common abbreviation for NumPy is NP. So this makes it a lot easier to call things from the NumPy library. Now in Jupyter notebooks, when you would like to run a cell, all you need to do is push Shift and Enter. Shift Enter will cause the interpreter to run all of the code that's in the block that you had highlighted previously. So now we have access to OS and NumPy. You may ask yourself, what can we do with OS? So what we can do with OS is we can grab our current directory's path, which is useful in a lot of ways, especially if you're going to be creating files and moving them around your operating system. This is a very useful thing to know how to do. So all you have to do to get your current directory is os.get cwd. That means os.get current working directory. And then anytime that you're using a function, you just want to put open and close parentheses. If it doesn't require any inputs, if it does require inputs, you may need to put some variables in there, but we'll get to that. So here we go. If we do the Shift and Enter, you'll see that it prints out our current working directory. So you can see that we are on our desktop. Pretty simple. So what you can do with any of these functions that just give an output is you can also set it to a variable. So we're just going to say working directory equals, and then we'll do that. Now you see that we don't get a printout anymore, but that printout is now saved to the variable working directory. All right, so now we can use working directory in anything that we would like. So if you're creating a function, if you are using it to create a new folder within this directory, you can do that. So another thing that you may want to know about the directory that you're in is all of the files that are present currently. So what we can do is os.listdir, list directory. Again, this is a function, so we'll do open close parentheses. And now you'll see that we have all of the items that are in our current working directory. And they are in a file type called a list. So if we type here type, this is going to be a built-in function from Python, which will tell us the type of the data that we're looking at. So you can see that this is of type list. So list is a very useful variable in that it is mutable, which means that you can change it after it's been created. And it's very simple in that it's just sort of a linear type of thing. You have variables, or you have items of any type, I think that probably the best way to go about doing this is to show you guys all of the types that exist in Python, so that way we can sort of have a base foundation of what there is to use as far as tools are concerned, and then we can branch out into how you use those tools. So I'm going to first start off with one of the most basic types in Python, which is going to be the string. So to create a string, what you want to do is push your quotes. In Jupyter, it's nice because whenever you have an enclosing argument like a open quotes or parentheses or brackets or curly braces, it will put the accompanying symbol on the other end and put your cursor right in the middle, so that way you can just get straight into typing what it is that you want to type and not having to worry about closing and remembering to close your variables. So what we're going to do here is just set a variable. So to set a variable, you just type a word. So we're going to call this string equals, and now we can just type inside of the quotes whatever we want. So we'll just do the standard coding thing, which is hello world. Now we'll go outside of the quotes, push enter. We'll go on to the next line. We'll say print, and we can type in string. And if you push tab, you will get access to tab completion, which will basically shortcut your typing process. So you can see that the first thing that's highlighted is the internal variable of Python called str, which is basically a string. And so that encompasses all of the things that a string can do. But we're going to push tab one more time to go down to our new variable called string. Push enter, that will autocomplete it. And now if we push shift tab to enter, you'll see that it prints out our message. So hello world. And we can also print out the type. So if we don't know what type of variable that is, we can say print type and then string. And now you can see here that that variable is of type class string. All right, cool. So we have our first type under our belt. Now let's move into one that's a little bit more complicated. So my list equals. Now a list is basically defined when you have a set of open and closing brackets. Now, you can create a list in a number of ways. You can either have it linearly, so we can say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Or you can have it done in this way. So if we just get rid of all of that, you can just push enter. In Jupyter, it's nice, it'll sort of give you this stacked way of doing it. So it'll put your closing brace all the way at the bottom and have you indented by a tab. So it's very clear all of the items that exist within that list. It's up to you how you choose to do this, but in some ways when you're working with large data sets, it may be more convenient to do it this way. But we'll just put 1, and then you can push enter, 2, enter. And now a list, what's nice about it is that it doesn't have to have the same variable type inside of it. You can put anything that you want inside of a list. So let's just say that we want to put 1.546. And then we also want to put in a string. So we can say 5. But that is a string and not just an integer. So now what we can do here is we can say print my list, And so now you can see here, all of our items are in that list and can be accessed by printing it. So you may ask, why would I store things in a list? Well, there's many reasons why you might want to store things in a list. One of which is that lists are what is called iterable, meaning that you can go through all of the items in a list and you can gather them out one by one, and you can even use those indices from a list to index another list. So that sounds a little bit complicated, but let's see how this is sort of put into practice. So first off, let's print the length of my list. So print len is a built-in Python function for printing out the length of some iterable. So then we do open close parentheses and then my list. So you can see that there are 4 items in this list. So let's make a second list. So my second list equals. And now what we're going to do is put in a bunch of names. So we'll say Jack, Jill, James, John. Okay. So now you see that we have a list of 4 names. So what we can do here is So what we can do here is we can actually loop through a list and have the index of that list loop through another list, so that way we can pair items together. Now, this may be useful if you're having, say, a list of employees and a list of salaries. So let's actually make another list called salaries equals, and we'll call this list salaries, and we'll just put in, okay. So now we have a list of salaries, we have a list of names. So what we're going to do here is loop through and pair the two together. So we can say for I, so I is commonly used as the variable that we use for an index, comma, name in, and now we're going to type out the keyword enumerate, E-N-U-M-E-R-A-T-E. So what enumerate does is it allows us to go through a list, and it will return what is known in Python as a tuple, which is basically just a pair inside of parentheses, or it could be a number of values inside of parentheses, which can be applied to variables. And so in this case, it will provide you with an index as well as with a key or a value from the list that you are iterating over. So we're going to iterate over my second list, which is the one that contains all of the names. Now, what you're going to do is go outside of the parentheses and push colon. So this will tell Python that you're done writing this first line for a loop. Now, when we push enter inside of Jupyter, what's nice is that it knows that, and so it'll automatically tab us in. So something to be very aware of in Python is that your indent level or your tab level is extremely important. And if tabs are out of place or they're in the wrong place, you will have issues. So always make sure that you are keeping up with your indent level. This is another reason why when you're just starting out, it's really important that you take things one cell at a time or one step at a time. So do very, very small changes instead of large changes, because you want to continuously be running your code to make sure that things are working right. So I could just keep going here and write the rest of the code for you, but I think it is instructive for us to first double check that the code is doing what we think it's going to be doing. So if you recall, I said that I think we are going to get an index under the variable I, and the name, which is the item, under the variable name. So we can do that very easily by using a print statement. So we can just type print, parentheses. Now there's a number of ways that we can do this. But I think one of the nicest ways from a end user standpoint and a debugging standpoint is to use text formatting or string interpolation. How we do this is we type double quotes, and do note that you can use the single quote or the double quote. So you may see people use the double quote. It's really a matter of personal preference. I just like using single quotes, but some people really like using double quotes. So what we can do here is we can say index. And now what we're going to do is type some curly braces here. And now comma, name. All right, and we can do this in a number of ways. I think one of the easier ways when you're just starting out is to do dot format. And then you can just type in I, comma, name. And what this will do is it will automatically match up your first input here with your first open curly braces and your second input here with your second curly braces. Alternatively, you could write a variable inside of here. So like, let's just say index. Then you would just say index equals I. And then we can say name equals name. So name equals name. Now, if we do Shift Enter here, you'll see that that did exactly what we thought it was going to do, which is give us our index under the variable I and our name under the variable name. And if you'll notice, the index does not start at 1. So this is a very common computer thing, but if you are not familiar with computers or you've never really done any coding before, this may be new to you. So the index will always start with the number 0. So basically, if you have a list of items and that list only contains one thing, the first item will be called 0. The second item, if you have one, is going to be 1, and 2, and onward. So now you see that we have access to the index and we have access to the name. But if you recall, our original goal was to be able to pair the name up with the salary from another list. So how do we do this? Well, what we can do is we can use the index to actually grab an item at a particular position from another list. So what we're going to do here is go in front of this first print statement and we'll put a little hashtag here. The hashtag basically allows us to create a comment or something that's not going to be run by Python, but it can still exist. So this will deactivate it. So if we just push Shift Enter now, you'll see that nothing happens because we don't actually have anything in the for loop, so we get an error. But not to worry, we will add some things right now. So we can say print. Now, another way that we can do text formatting, which is a way that can be pretty nice in certain situations, is we can also say F, then quote, quote. So the F string, as this is called, is like a formatting string, which basically negates the need for us to do this dot format thing. We can just have it all in line. So what we can do is say name. And now what we can do is type name. So you see that the color of this is black, indicating that it's actually code that Python is going to read, rather than red, which is a string formatting color, which means that Python's not reading that as code. And so now after name, what we can do is we can say makes. And now we'll do another curly brace set. And inside of this, what we're going to do is say salaries. So that's the list that we want to pull from. And what we can do here is open bracket here. And instead of putting a hard number, because if we were to put a number, like let's say 2, right? If we run this now, you'll see that everybody has the same number, but in the salaries, everybody has a different number. So in order to get access to that, we just push I. And so now you'll see that as we move through, it will pair the first name in the list, Jack, with the salary listed for Jack. And as we go through here, it will just keep pairing up the name with the salary. And so that's how we get this. So that's pretty cool. But maybe you want to have all of this information stored in one thing, so that way one variable holds both the name and the salary, so that way it doesn't have the potential to get mixed up the way that it would in a list, because a list, if you recall, is mutable, so it can change. And also, you may add names to your second list, so like say it's your employees. You may add names to that list, but you may not necessarily add salaries, or vice versa. You may add salaries but not names. A really good way of keeping things organized in that regard is to create something called a dictionary. So a dictionary basically holds information using what is called keys. So we can create a dictionary. We'll call this employees. So E-M-P-L-O-I-E-S. So we'll call employees equals, and now we'll do open curly braces. Now, again, as with a list, we can just push enter here, and this will set us up to do a little bit of nice formatting. So the first entry is going to be a string, or you can even have it be like an integer or something like that. But I think strings are a pretty good place to start for keys. So we'll just say Jack. All right, so Jack is an employee, and now we can say colon. And this will be our entry. So you can actually have dictionaries inside of dictionaries, which is what we're going to be doing here. So we'll say Jack, and then we will have another dictionary in here. And so now we can put in our own keys for Jack. So we'll say position, programmer. Now we can do comma, enter, quote. Now we can say salary. And what we can do is put in a number. So we'll say 13,000. All right, and then we can also say languages. So we'll say list. All right, so now we can say Python and Java. Okay, so now we have a couple of things for Jack. Now, what is nice too about Jupyter that you may notice is that whenever we go near any of these closing things, like for the list, it's brackets, you'll see that they highlight green. So this is really helpful, so that way if you have a lot of items like we have now, you can figure out where one dictionary ends or one list ends and where the next one begins. So with Jack here, we see that his entry ends right here where we're at. So we can push comma and enter. So now we're going to be entering another employee name. So we'll say Emma. Now we're going to add another dictionary here. And now we can say position. And we'll say marketing. Now what we can do is type in our salary. And we'll say 40,000. All right. And let's just say that we don't need to have languages because a marketing person doesn't do that, but maybe they have something that Jack doesn't have, and we'll say years of experience. And so we'll say 5. All right, so, now we have this sort of larger, more complicated thing that we've been creating. How do we actually use this in a practical sense? Well, what you can do here is if we just type print employees, you see that this is a little bit hard to read. But what we can do, all right, and so we can do employees.get and then Jack. So this will search through the employees dictionary, and if it finds a Jack entry, it will give us all of this information. So you can see position programmer, salary 13,000, languages, Python and JavaScript. So this is a pretty handy way of storing information. Additionally, you can add to a existing dictionary, and you can add to it in a loop if you want. So for instance, we already have a list of employees. So we have this my second list, and we also have a list of salaries. So why don't we try updating our employees list with that information? So we can say for I, comma, name in enumerate my list, second list. All right, so now what we can do is we can say salary equals salaries I. So this will give us the current salary of the name. And now what you want to do is type employees.update. And now what we can do here is do curly braces inside of the parentheses. You can push enter if you'd like. And now what we're going to do is type name. So this will make a new entry for the name. And then we can push colon, do the open curly braces. So that way we're creating a dictionary for the name. And now we can say salary, colon, and we'll just use our variable salary. And now what we can do is print out employees.keys. This will give us basically a list of all of the employees that we've added. So if we do that, now you see here that we have Jack, Emma, Jill, James, and John. And before we only had Jack and Emma. So what we can do here is, of course, go through and let's just say that you want to see all of the salaries as well as the employee who makes that salary, but you want to do it like we did up here in a loop. You can do that with a dictionary as well. So we can say for, and we'll just say name in employees. So what this is going to do is it's going to loop through your employees dictionary, and it will give you the key associated with the entry in the dictionary. So if we just say print name, you'll see we get all of our names printed out. So that is nice. Now all we need to do is just do a little bit of text formatting here. So we can say, well, actually, first we're going to get their salary. So salary equals, and what we can do here is we can say employees, then you will do the open bracket, and we'll type name. So this says get the entry for the name. And now since the entry for the name is, of course, also a dictionary, we can use the method called .get. So this is a function that basically allows us to grab a piece of information with a certain key in it. And if that key doesn't exist, it'll return nothing, so that way you don't get any errors. There are some times where you may think that there will be an entry in a dictionary and there's not. If that happens, you would get an error. But this prevents us from having that sort of problem. So what we can do is get and then salary. So then what we do here is, again, we can do an f string, and we'll say name earns salary per year. And now if we do Shift Enter, you'll see that now all of that information gets put in a text format. So you see that dictionaries are very powerful as they can leverage all of the different data types like strings, integers, floats, lists. They can integrate all of that into one variable, and then you can draw on that information in an iterable way if you like at a later point in time. So that is something that is extremely useful, and I think that you'll find very helpful as you move through your Python journey. All right, so I think that that's probably a good place to call it as far as our first introduction to Python. I think we went through quite a bit in terms of how Python functions, what you might want to do with it, and how you can store data. In the next episode, we'll go through a little bit more detail of how we actually leverage packages and other things like that in Python to create more complicated programs and solve more complicated tasks. If you guys would like any help with a particular problem, please do leave that down in the comment section below, and I might actually make a video showing how to solve your particular problem so that it can help you as well as anybody who may have your similar problem. I've been programming for about 4 years at this point, and I do some pretty high-level stuff, so hopefully I will be able to be a really great resource for you guys. But again, with that being said, I hope you guys found some value in this and are excited for the next portion of and are excited for the next videos to come in this series. So again, make sure that you are subscribed, and I will see you guys in the next video.